What's up guys, Asian here again with the last of our 5-part series of videos in the Getting Started in Vet Trials series here. So this last video is not necessarily geared towards those of you guys who are, beginners in vet trials. This is geared more towards people who kind of want to get a sense of what it's like to raid lead and are maybe want to raid lead their own guild either now or someday, further down the line. This particular video is kind of geared towards those individuals. So there's nothing really here that I'm going to cover that's going to be helpful for any sort of beginner raiders, so people who are just starting to join vet trials, but you still might want to tune in because this video will at least give you some insight into how raid leads kind of form their guilds, how we kind of make decisions based on what happens in the team and things like that. And so a little bit of insight into our thinking might help you kind of become better raiders in your own sense, just because now you kind of have an idea of what it is that raid leads are actually looking for and what's going on through their heads during a raid. So one of the things that I like to think about when raid leading is kind of what sort of atmosphere you want to build as the team itself. So each guild has its own different atmospheres, and you guys can probably see that between Hellfire Dominion and Mayflower. You'll find that Mayflower were a little bit more laid back than Hellfire Dominion is, and I only lead for Hellfire Dominion, so I don't lead from Mayflower at all. So you can kind of see the difference in raid leading styles between those two guilds. So I lead for Hellfire Dominion, and Jared leads from Mayflower. So Jared takes kind of a more laid-back approach, not necessarily, kind of take it easy or lackadaisical, but he's a lot more casual with it. Yes, he does get, a little bit frustrated when we keep on screwing up mechanics, but generally speaking, his personality is very different from mine. I'm a little bit more uptight about certain things. And I'm a little bit more strict when it comes to, dying to mechanics or kind of messing up on mechanics repeatedly over and over again. So one of the things that you kind of want to do as a raid lead is figure out what kind of atmosphere you want to build for your team right off the bat. One of the common things that I like to compare this to is being an RA in college. I had a friend in RA who was an RA in college, and he would always tell me the thing that you want to kind of set for your residents first is, what kind of RA am I? Am I going to be the kind of very laid back RA who tries to, not get you guys in trouble so much unless he absolutely has to, or am I going to be more of a hardline RA that is pretty much a stickler for the rules and goes by the books and things like that? He mentions that if you're going back and forth between these two, people get confused. People don't know really how to react, how to respond to things that you're doing. So you just want to make sure you stick to whatever sort of style that you want to go for. That being said, though, I do not recommend kind of mimicking another raid lead. When I first started raid leading, I tried to mimic Jared, and I found that it didn't really work out for me. So I don't recommend kind of pretending to be a personality that you're not. Just kind of be who you normally would be as a leader in, like, let's say like a project team, if you're an engineer or something like that, or if you're just kind of like leading a sports team or something like that. So kind of see yourself in this leadership position and kind of make decisions based on what you would actually do in a real life leadership position. Don't try to mimic raid leads like from Sempiternal Way. Don't try to mimic raid leads that you might already be under, because everybody has their own different way of raid leading. So for those of you guys who are kind of new to vet trials and are looking for guilds to join, this is something that you're going to want to watch out for. You want to make sure that the raid lead's attitude is kind of what you're searching for. So when I first joined Mayflower, I wasn't entirely sure what Jared's leading style was going to be like. But I still joined, and when I found out that he was a kind of more laid back, more relaxed, just kind of want to have fun kind of person, that kind of hooked me into Mayflower, and I'm still there today. On the other hand, for Hellfire Dominion, I kind of wavered back and forth between I want to be like Jared, I want to be myself, and at some point I just kind of made the atmosphere very uncomfortable because I was trying to reconcile two different types of raid leading. So again, back to that RA thing, you don't want to go back and forth between the nice guy and the bad guy. You just kind of want to stick to one single guy. So once I kind of settled down into my kind of personality and kind of what I normally do, we kind of fell into this kind of groove. We don't necessarily talk as much. There's not a lot of banter in Hellfire Dominion, but it's still a little bit more relaxed. But we still have a little bit more of a serious face going on, just because that's kind of the way I see raiding. The other thing that you're going to want to do as a raid lead is kind of also set the expectations as well. So again, everybody's turning to you as the leader of the group. You're going to be the ones making the decisions. So you kind of want to make sure to set the expectations for what your group is going to do pretty much right off the bat as soon as you have the team ready to go. So don't kind of be like, well, I'm not sure if we're going to be doing this or doing that. So when I first picked up the team from Hellfire Dominion, my goal was, all right, we're going to progress through content in a kind of quasi-linear way. So we started off with only a VMOL clear, and then we gradually started moving up. So we did Hall's Fabrication, then we did Cloud Rest a little bit, and then we moved to Asylum Hard Mode, and then we decided to kind of go back to Maw Hard Mode. So kind of set those expectations right off the bat. So if people are looking for, let's say, a progression style guild, but you're kind of want to take the team as more of a more casual, let's just kind of do vet trials here and there, and not worry about necessarily progressing to the hardest content. You kind of want to be upfront with that right away. Similarly, if your goal is to basically completely master the Kraglan trials and get as high of a score as you can on each trial, it might not be you want to say that right up front, so that way people who are expecting more progression style things to do other sorts of trials, they don't get sucked in and then find out too late that this is not the right guild or for them. So make sure to set those expectations of what you want to accomplish right away. Another expectation you want to set right away is DPS expectation, healer expectations, tank expectations. In other words, how you're going to be, I don't like to use the word, but how are you going to be judging everybody on the team? So, one thing that I always use when I'm judging people is, again, I don't like using the word judging, but there's really no other way to put it, is basically how often are you dying to mechanics, and are you dying to the same mechanics over and over again? So for instance, in Hellfire Dominion in VMAW hard mode, one of the things that we were dying to fairly often were meteors. So, I'm taking a look at people who's dying to meteors, who's dying consistently to meteors, what can I do to kind of fix things, and if I take these steps to fix them, are they still dying as often? And that's kind of one of the measures of success that I use. How often are you dying, and are you dying to the same mechanics? Are you learning from your mistakes, basically? Mayflower has a very similar approach in that whenever we're stuck on a mechanic, we kind of take a step back, say, okay, what's going on? Is there something that we're not understanding? And kind of go from there. So you kind of want to make sure to set those expectations correctly, especially if you're progression style guild. Mainly because there are always going to be people who are going to be looking to, for spots in guilds, and they might come across your guild and say, oh, I want to join this guild because they're progressing through Asylum hard mode, and I want to do Asylum hard mode. So you kind of want to set those expectations right off the bat. If you're a DPS, you should always be hitting at least this amount of DPS in a given trial. Or if you're a tank, I should be seeing at least X amount of percent debuff uptime on Alkosh or something like that. So that's something that you're going to want to keep in mind here. Now, that being said, if someone doesn't meet your expectations, that's kind of on you to kind of let them know that. And I'm not the kind of person who likes to mince words or beat around the bush. I just go straight for it and say, hey, your DPS is not quite up to what we are expecting in our team. Can you work on your DPS? I don't like to give out ultimatums. I like to give people chances to kind of recover from things like this. Maybe something's going on in real life that's distracting them from raiding. Things happen. So as a raid lead, it's kind of on you to kind of come to these conclusions, make these decisions, and you really just have to stick to your guns and kind of just set them out in stone. That doesn't mean you can't be flexible. So I'm pretty flexible when it comes to people who want to join and lead the team accordingly, depending on real life stuff. But at the same time, you kind of have to kind of know when to stand your ground on certain things. So if somebody is not meeting those DPS requirements anymore, you're gonna have to say, hey, look, you got to step up your DPS, or I'm gonna have to cut you loose. Just because we have certain standards, we have certain expectations, and you're not quite meeting them. So don't be afraid to kind of be that guy on the team. Sometimes you might need somebody else to kind of help you along. Maybe you want to tag team talking to this person, but whatever you want to do, just make sure that you're upholding those standards and those expectations that you're setting. Those of you guys who are new to vet trials, again, this is something that you're going to want to keep in mind. What are the expectations of the team that you're going to join? So for example, for Mayflower, the expectation is you don't play like shit, basically. If things happen and real life stuff happens, you're expected to kind of let the raid lead or the scheduler know ahead of time, and just kind of take things into your own hand. Jared puts a lot of faith in us that because we are rating at such a high level, that we're capable of taking care of ourselves. For Hellfire Dominion, my expectations are a little bit different. I expect people to, at the very least, consistently hit the same DPS check, on our dummy parses before each raid. I expect people to die fewer times every time we do the same content over and over again. Sometimes these things don't come to pass, and sometimes just got to be like, well, maybe it was just a bad raid night or something like that. So, just kind of keep an eye on what those standards are when you first join a guild. Now, another thing that as a raid lead you should be doing, and as a raider in general, but particularly as a raid lead, is you should be communicating with other people in other guilds. One of the things that I have learned as a raid lead in Hellfire Dominion is just how much knowledge there is out there and how many different strategies there are across endgame PvE. So I am part of several discords where there are a lot of people who are playing at various levels, whether that's kind of beginner level, progression level, or the very, very high end leaderboard levels. And I am never afraid to ask them questions. I am never afraid to give advice. And whenever I see a piece of advice that I think will help us, I will shamelessly take that advice and be like, hey, let's try this instead. That's one of the most important things when it comes to kind of bettering yourself. It's kind of going to different sources and taking these different sources, kind of filtering them out, seeing which piece of advice is going to be best for your group, which piece of advice you can ignore, and things like that, and incorporate that into your own style. You'll see that a lot in Hellfire Dominion. Deadly is part of a leaderboard guilds, so he has different strategies that I either do not know about, or I've never even bothered to kind of think about, or how to approach a certain thing. So for a good example would be VMAW hard mode or execute stack. So I learned VMAW hard mode through Jared. Most of my endgame content experience comes from Mayflower. So when it came to hard mode execute in MAW, I kind of just went with what Mayflower did, and it worked for us, and it worked both for Mayflower and for Hellfire Dominion. But when Deadly said, hey, let's try this instead next time we're in VMAW hard mode, and he explained it to me, and he showed me the formation and everything like that, I meant, hey, that made a lot of sense. Why we should be doing this next time we do VMAW hard mode. So, that's a good example of learning from somebody else, taking somebody else's experiences and, using that into your own group there. There's no shame in doing that. It's just the way that everybody kind of progresses through content. And you'll see that a lot. So, Hellfire Dominion, we do certain strategies a little bit differently compared to leaderboard guilds. Mayflower does things a little bit differently from Hellfire Dominion just because we're we raid at different levels, or we're looking to do different things, accomplish different things. So, definitely reach out to other people and ask for advice, ask for help. Especially for raid leads, it'll help you kind of figure out where weaknesses lie in the group, kind of how to best deal with certain mechanics. Maybe some other raid group has dealt with that same sort of issue and can give you some sort of advice. And for those of you guys who are just starting to get into vet trials, this is a good chance for you to kind of learn how are people changing their rotations, how are people changing their builds based on progression. So for example, if you're progressing through Cloud Rust hard mode, you might have a different build for that compared to, let's say, Asylum hard mode, because you're in a progression mode, not necessarily a let's get it clear mode. So definitely look around for advice, ask for advice, and use that advice. Obviously, if it's good advice. Now, whether it's good or bad advice is kind of a little bit subjective, but generally speaking, I would avoid Reddit. I would probably avoid the official forums too. I would probably stick to toxic raiding environments. That Discord's always nice to kind of go for, and I would look for people who have I don't want to say certified, but certified vet trials experience. These are the people who have streamed these trials, who have the scores on the leaderboards to back it up. So, classic examples would be like Alcast, Nephis, Leofa, Heals the Fields. Tabata doesn't play anymore, but I would say Tabata is also a good one when she comes back. Definitely look for those people's YouTubes, their Twitch streams. Try to find them on Discord if you maybe share a guild with them, and ask them for advice if you feel like it. A lot of us are, again, very open to kind of helping new players out. So those are probably the most important piece of advice that I would give for raid leads. And like I said, for those of you guys who are just joining, the vet trials community, take this advice as kind of what you can also do to improve yourself in the eyes of the raid lead and things like that. Now, the last piece of advice that I do want to talk about for raid leads is kind of something that is a little bit concerning for the endgame community, and that's kind of recruiting new people. Recruitment is always going to be one of the more difficult things you're going to have to do as a raid lead as people start to leave for real life stuff, or because they just want to quit the game, or maybe somebody just isn't pulling the right DPS or not meeting expectations. Recruiting people, recruiting new blood is really the only way that the endgame community can continue to thrive and can continue to grow. So as a raid lead, you will kind of share a little bit in this responsibility of kind of growing the endgame community. That doesn't necessarily mean doing something like starting a Twitch channel or a YouTube channel. That doesn't necessarily mean posting on Reddit or things like that. But at the same time, you should be keeping an eye out for any sort of new talent, whether that's in your guild or in another guild that you might be doing, or maybe even in pugs. Maybe you find somebody in a pug who's a very good tank or a very good healer, or who has very good potential, you think, and you invite them to join your guild, as a fill. That's probably one of the more important things that a lot of people kind of forget about as a raider. You kind of have a responsibility now to kind of keep the community thriving, keep the community growing. So I would highly recommend, if you are a raid lead, to kind of keep an eye on the official forums or Reddit for people who want to join vet trials and invite them to your guild. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have a spot in the team itself, but for those people who run open vet trials like Hellfire Dominion does, this is a nice way to kind of get people into the endgame community, kind of show them what it's like, and hopefully they will find a reason to continue to do vet trials and to continue to progress and get better. That's kind of a side job that you have to do as a raid. You have to basically inspire not just your team but other people as well to join vet trials and to basically improve upon themselves. So that's pretty much going to be covered for this video as well as this series. I might add future videos to this series, as addendums or appendices, so to speak, kind of covering short things, maybe like how to progress through trials, how to change up your build, what to look for, and things in boss mechanics, things like that. I will be updating, trials guides and things like that when I get the chance to. So definitely be on the lookout for that. All that will actually probably be in this playlist right here, getting started in vet trials. Especially the trials mechanics, because that's something that a lot of people I know, at least me personally, I wish I knew certain mechanics going into certain boss fights. And I'll try to share these strategies that I've kind of built up over the years of raiding that I have done. So that's pretty much it for this video. If you are a raid lead and you have any other pieces of advice you'd like to give to people, please feel free to share them down in the comment section below. If you have any questions or comments at all about raiding in general, how to be a leader or things like that, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below as well, and we will try to answer them to the best of our ability. I'll also have links down in the description below to links to the Toxic Raiding Environment Discord, as well as a couple of links that I think will be very useful for raid leads to kind of figure out what their leadership style is and kind of how to capitalize on your leadership styles. These are not necessarily quote-unquote scientific, but these are tests that I've taken that have kind of shaped the way that I have viewed leadership and how I personally lead things both in-game and in real life. So those links will be down in the description below. That's it for this video. Hope you guys found it informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.